Bing. How do I look?
Dude, you look, you're a very handsome man.
There you go.
Very handsome man.
Um,
So Chris, all right, I do not want to butcher your last name, but I'm going to try. Is it Picconi?
Picconi.
Picconi.
Yep, Picconi.
Okay.
Yep,
Um, well, I've never done it this way before. You're in New Jersey, correct?
correct. Yep.
Okay, so I appreciate you being on here. We're having a little collaborative movement, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah, man. Same here. I'm sitting in
Um,
Asbury Park, New Jersey, right now.
and you said that you're in like an industrial area. Are you in your shop? Is it connected to your
It
house?
is not connected to my house, so I have an offsite. So
So you have your own like separate space, like your man cave?
yeah, I do actually. So I live about 100 yards off the beach, and keeping old trucks anywhere near the beach is not great with salt water. So I have a small warehouse. It's probably a couple miles off the beach in a town that's a couple miles away from me, where it's not only the classic 4x4 office, but it's also the home and garage for my personal collection.
Well, and speaking of personal collection, I can see that's a Traveler, right? An 80 Traveler, right?
That's a
And you
1980
got
Traveler, which I'm just finishing right now, and you might not be able to see it, but it does not have an interior right now.
well, it looks fantastic. And then right there, the little sliver, that's a K5, am I correct?
That's a 1990 late second gen Chevy K5 Blazer. So it's unique. It's technically a V10 Blazer, not a K5 Blazer, because GM changed the C and K monikers to R and V in 1988, I believe. So, but everybody still
Okay.
calls it the K5.
And is there anything else that we can't see in there?
There is not at the moment. Everything is all over
There's
the
not.
place.
Well, okay, you have other things, or just not in your little
Just not
warehouse.
my little warehouse right now.
Well, you did mention the classic 4x4 podcast, and I think a lot of people watching probably know what that is. Tell me, how did you get started with that?
How it got started was a mentor of mine. How the podcast got started, and keep in mind, the podcast is a companion to my business, which is Classic 4x4. So I guess you got to take a step back. The business is what
Okay,
really
let's do that.
started first, and essentially, I had the opportunity to be semi-retire rather young, and when I had nothing to do, I wasn't working full time anymore. I started collecting trucks and 4x4s. I've been collecting vehicles for decades now, but I've always had,
Really?
oh yeah, I started collecting in like 2006.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Yep. I actually, so if you want to even go back that far, I started collecting European fast cars, mostly BMW M's, back in the day. And then that led to, in 2012, I bought my first classic truck, which was a Omaha Orange 1981 Jeep CJ7. And that was like pivotal in my passion for collector trucks.
How much did you pay for that? Because that was a while
Dude,
ago.
I
Was
paid
it cheap?
fully restored, impeccable. It wasn't a frame off, but it was a frame on, fully restored. I paid $9,000 in 2012.
What do you think it's worth today? You don't have it
I
anymore, do you?
don't. I sold it at auction 2 years ago, and ironically, the guy that ended up buying it lives in the town I live in. He just ended up being one of the bidders and ended up buying it. So I still see it all the time.
Do you? Well, it's so funny you say that. And I've said this before, is because there was a sliver of a moment where I thought about selling this, and I was like, you know what? If I sell it, I'm going to have like a rule in the listing. Like I was in Florida at the time. I was like, nobody in Florida can buy it. I won't sell it to anybody because I didn't want to see it because it would make me really upset. So how does it feel when you actually see it driving around? I mean, does it make you, feel like you shouldn't have sold it or
No
something?
way, man. So it was the one that I said I was
No.
never going to sell, but I ended up selling it because I feel bad. Like, these trucks, they're living and breathing, right? And you want them to be
Yeah.
appreciated and enjoyed and loved. And you can only drive one at a time. And that's one of the reasons I've actually really pared down my own personal collection. But I, that CJ7 was just kind of sitting in the corner. It was getting started once a week. I was never driving it. And now I get to see it
Yeah.
driving around my awesome beach town. And the guy that bought it is driving around enjoying it with his family. So actually, it's the exact opposite. Every time I see it, it actually and them enjoying it, it puts a smile on my face.
That's awesome, man. Okay, so then you started collecting in 2006, and then that kind of morphed into the business that you started.
So in 2012, I bought the first collector truck, which is that 81 CJ7, and then I started collecting. I basically stopped collecting everything else and started collecting only trucks and 4x4s, classic vintage trucks and
Okay.
4x4s. And then fast forward to a few years ago, I ended up kind of semi-retiring, and got to keep yourself busy, man. And so I really started to dial up my collecting to a problematic area, to an area where I ended up with way too much, and it was too much time, too much money, and then I started to sell them. So to pass them down the line, just to so other people could enjoy them. And what ended up happening was fellow enthusiasts and collectors that I knew were watching me, you know, do all the creative, the photography, the videography, finding the best in breed photographers, videographers, copywriters. They saw that I was strategically putting them in different marketplaces, and they really saw how I was selling the stuff out of my own personal collection and how effective I was doing it, and at the numbers I was selling them at. I still hold some records for some of the trucks that I sold out of my personal collection, and then
Really?
yeah. So actually, one of the top 10 CJ8 Scrambler sales in history is actually out of my personal collection.
Get out of here.
Yeah, yeah, that's one that I wish I didn't sell because that was a great truck.
I'm
Yeah.
sure. Well, so do you have a strategy, excuse me, or is it just different marketplaces? Like I'm just going to say marketplace like Facebook, but I'm sure you have your Bring Your Trailers. I mean, Craigslist is probably no longer alive, marketplace. But do you have other avenues of selling
Of
them?
course, yeah. I leverage different marketplaces, and different vehicles perform better in different marketplaces, and that's part of the go-to-market strategy. And that's actually when I started to really sell these vehicles that were in my personal collection, and other collectors, enthusiasts started to watch me do it, and say, "Wow, you're pretty good at this. You do a great job. You understand the markets, you understand the valuations, and you present these vehicles really well out in the market. Will you help me?" And people started coming to me and saying, "Hey, will you help me sell my truck?" And one request turned into two, turned into three, and next thing you know, I had a business.
That's awesome. So
Yeah,
you follow the market pretty well, obviously.
I literally sit in front of four screens
Do you
like a
really?
trader all day long, looking at different marketplaces, looking at data, looking at different auctions that are going off.
So
It's
as of right now,
I'm a
like
student.
late 2024, right? Where are we right now? At least with the classic 4x4, where are we? What's happening?
We are in the collector vehicle market in general, and keep in mind the truck and 4x4 collector truck and 4x4 market has been very resilient because there's an insatiable appetite and demand for the 35 to 55 demographic,
Okay,
and they're buying collector trucks and 4x4s like it's going out of style because it's the stuff that we all saw when we were little kids,
sure.
right? Um, but to answer your question, where we're at in the market right now was, 2017 to 2022 was a complete bull market, especially like 2020 to 2022. You could throw anything against the wall, it was going to stick and do a great
Was that
number.
just
The market
COVID,
corrected.
where people were just kind of bored and like, you know what, I don't know what to do. I'm going to buy an old truck and fix it up.
Kind of. It was that people had time, people had money, the economy was strong, rates were low. It was a perfect
Okay,
storm, and it really put the wind at the back of the collector vehicle market. Right as trucks and 4x4s and that 35 to 55 demographic really started to buy trucks and 4x4s. That all changed in 2023. The market pulled back pretty heavily in 2023. It imbalanced heavily, meaning there was more supply than there was demand for most makes and models in the collector vehicle market, and we saw prices come down. And we started to see that also in the earlier part of the year, but though the earlier part of the year was volatile, early 2024 is really when we started to see the collector vehicle market really balance out between buyers and sellers. And then second quarter, it was rather unremarkable, but we really started to see that balance. So right now, to answer your question, where we're at in the market is really balanced out. It's healthy, and we're on our way to appreciating.
okay.
And if we haven't seen appreciation in certain makes and models
Well, I asked you this before, but I think I want to ask you again, right? So take the like 60s, 70s muscle cars, right? You're seeing the all original ones just selling for ridiculous amounts, right? But you're now seeing, from what I see, the classic 4x4, the original ones aren't bringing the money, as much money as like the highly modified ones. Why do you think that is?
So that actually is more based on certain makes and models, right? So different makes and models, um, buyers desire different setups and originality or modifications. And I'll use Jeep CJ7s as an example.
Okay.
A highly original CJ7 is always going to do a bigger number and be more desirable in the market than like a small block 350 or LS swap CJ7. But on the flip side, let's talk about scouts, right? You and I are
Yeah.
scout guys. Scouts that have LS swaps, with a say a 6L80E, automatic trans are going to do a much bigger number than an original Scout with a 304 or 345. So it really depends on the specific make and model and the type of buyer and what that buyer desires within that market.
Well, and I would think too, like, you go back to those muscle cars that, those original ones, let's say an original Hemi. I mean, that thing, for
Mhm.
back then it was really fast. And by today's standards, I mean, it's still fast, right? So you put something else in there, you're just going to make it a little bit faster. But like take an original Bronco or original Scout. I mean, it's kind of a dog, right? But you put in 400
Oh,
horsepower, it's
completely.
a lot more fun to drive,
Oh
right?
man, you Coyote swap or Godzilla swap a Bronco,
Yeah.
you LS swap a Scout, and you open up to a whole new market that is willing to pay drastically more.
So when do you think, I mean, it's probably pretty close, but when do you think that that Scout is gonna catch up with the Bronco value wise? Do you think it will?
Well, sadly, Bronco values have actually been pulling back. The first gen Broncos have been very soft for I'd say a little over a year, probably 18 months, 2 years, right before the market got soft. That Bronco effect is kind of over. You saw Broncos were throwaway, first gen Broncos were throwaway trucks for years. All of a sudden, Ford announced that they were bringing the Bronco back. It brought it front and center in front of the casual enthusiast, and
Yeah.
then the casual enthusiast and everybody and their mother wanted first gen Broncos. They ended up getting way overvalued. The market got flooded. There was an immense amount of supply out there, and the prices started to pull back. So first gen Broncos are at a different price point now than they were a year and a half, 2 years ago. Fully restored, beautiful frame off first gen Bronco, you know, was 80 to $100,000
Yeah,
2 years
it's
ago.
yeah.
That truck now is 40 to
Is it, are
$50,000.
they really?
Right? Yes.
Well,
Yeah. I mean, there's some deals out there.
well, you did bring up the new Bronco. I think we should talk about the new Scout. What do you think?
And to parlay on your previous question, right? Because I want to ask you a question about it. But parlay on your previous question, what we're seeing in the Scout market right now, which I believe is similar to the Bronco effect, is the Scout effect. For
Okay.
the longest time, Scouts were just throwaway
Yeah.
vehicles, and now Volkswagen has announced the new Scout coming to the market, and people that didn't even know what a Scout was 6 months ago now know what a Scout is, right? And now that the average enthusiast now understands what it is and wants it and is driving prices up because there's a lot less supply available in the vintage Scout market than there is in the first gen Bronco market, and especially clean stuff. So I think we're going to see a similar, just like we saw the Bronco effect a couple years ago. Now that Volkswagen Group has introduced the new Scout, we're going to start to see the Scout effect, and I see Scouts, seeing some immense appreciation over the next couple of years going into 2027.
Well, so, there's been a lot of chatter online that I read. I usually don't participate in it on people's feelings on what they've done. So I'm curious, as a Scout owner, what do you think?
I think I love EVs. I got to remember, I daily drive an EV
Uh-huh.
already, and EVs for me are different than like, yes, there's the whole go green aspect, and that's which is not the reason that I drive an EV. Honestly, like, I do care about the environment, but like what I daily drive, I don't take that into consideration. What I love about an EV is the fact that, I drive a Rivian, I daily drive a Rivian R1S,
Okay.
right? That, and it's a quad motor, 835 horsepower, 0 to 60 in 3 seconds, with like, 10,000 pounds of torque, right? All
Yeah.
so like think about
Yeah,
this,
I
right?
know.
You have the power, you have the power, you have the horsepower and pickup of a finely tuned LS with the torque of a 12 valve Cummins.
Yeah. No, I
I mean, that's
listen,
insane.
I totally get it. And again, I've driven one, I've ridden one, I don't own one, I don't really plan on it. But I think for me, one of the reasons why I just wouldn't buy one, I think is what everybody's is right, range anxiety. And honestly, like how long it takes to charge it. And like when I get home, plugging it in. And I know this sounds stupid and simple, but like, if you forget to plug it in for whatever reason, you're kind of shit out of luck, right?
Yeah, but you can always find a supercharger. This actually happened to us last week. My
Really?
wife and I had to head to the city. Yeah, head to New York City, and which is about an hour drive, and we forgot to plug the Rivian in the night before. So we just stopped at a supercharger on the way, which is right on the way to the Garden State Parkway. Plugged it in into the supercharger. It was full in a half hour. It happens to be at a shopping center, so we walked around.
Okay.
So we left the house a half hour early, went to the shopping center, walked around, did a little shopping. By the time we were done,
Car's charged?
the truck was fully charged, and we were on our way to the city.
Well, no, so since you do have the Rivian, you probably know it, a lot better than I do. How similar do you think it is to the Scout pickup, the Terra?
So I actually have the Rivian R1S. I
Oh,
have
the
this. I
SUV.
have the SUV. I don't have the
Okay.
truck. I got to tell you, I love the Scout. And to answer your question, literally, like the second ordering opened up, I
Did you?
ordered my Scout Traveler. Oh yeah,
Hey.
I put my reservation in, paid my $100, and I ordered it immediately. And I ordered what I think Scout did an amazing job with was not only maintaining the heritage, but the EV gas model, right?
Sure.
And that's what I think. That's what I ordered was the EV gas model. And if you want to dig into that, I think that technology is absolutely genius.
Yeah, so it's basically just a small generator that's charging the battery while you're driving, right? So you get that extended range.
Correct. Yeah. So unlike a hybrid, which a hybrid still has an internal combustion engine, which drives the wheels along with electric engines, what Scout has done is they've basically the whole powertrain is still EV, right? It's still an electric vehicle. It's all electric motors driven by the batteries. But what they've done is they've taken and put essentially an onboard generator that is gas powered and that allows for extended range by powering and recharging the batteries on board in one self-contained
Are they the
unit, which
first?
is absolutely genius in my opinion.
Are they the first ones to do that? No.
They are not. It's actually very popular with Chinese EVs, which
Okay.
we don't, because of trade embargoes, we don't have Chinese EVs here. But it's actually a very popular setup with Chinese EVs. They're the first U.S. EV manufacturer that I'm familiar with that is using that type of
Well,
technology.
speaking of U.S., I love that they're building that factory in Blythewood. I think it was $2 billion, and I think I remember like 90, or I mean it could even be 100 of the parts are sourced in the U.S. I mean that's pretty cool.
It's awesome. I mean, you'd be surprised. Some U.S. automakers have vehicles that are less U.S.
Yeah.
source parts than some foreign. Like, I mean, like a friend of mine was asking me recently. He's like, I really like, he's always driven GMC's pickup trucks. Oh, and he's on he's had a couple AT4s, and he's like, I was like, dude, you got to get a Toyota Tundra, and he's like, dude, I want an American vehicle. I want a pure American vehicle. I
That's
was like,
more
well, guess
American.
what? The Toyota Tundra is actually more American than the GM, than your GMC Sierra AT4,
Well,
and he was like, I can't believe that.
it's so funny you say that because I've always had GM SUVs. I got smaller kids, right? So, and I always loved Tahoes. I've had I don't know how many of them, but like I've been talking to some guys like you and some other people that are really big Toyota guys, and they've made me really want to consider, and especially the new Sequoia. I'm a big fan of the new Sequoia.
The Toyotas, I just came off of 10 years of daily driving Toyota 4Runner TRD Pros, a brand new color of the year TRD Pro every year. I'm very fortunate. I have a good friend of mine that owns a Toyota dealership, so I'm able to get him through his allocation. But this is the first time in 10 years I haven't driven a Toyota. And it was because there's a model year change. And I was waiting for the new body style to come out, the new 6th gen 4Runner. So to fill that gap is when I got the Rivian R1S. And I have to say, I do miss my Toyotas. They're amazing. They hold their value. You don't ever have to do anything to them other than, tires, brakes, rotors, wipers. But I am thoroughly impressed with the Rivian, and there's a little bit of a learning curve with an EV, but I'm happy I made that jump. But my next daily driver next year will I'm going to go back to a Toyota, probably one of the ones with the hybrid powertrain.
So with that Scout, the new one, did you like the overall design? Do you think they came close enough to the original, but just kept it, with a new taste, new flavor to it?
They did a great job. I mean, in my opinion, they've done a phenomenal job. There's actual buttons
Yeah,
and knobs in the interior. I mean, the fact that in the Terra they have a bench seat option, that is so
I
cool.
I thought that was the
Uh,
coolest. Yeah.
I thought that was absolutely cool. But you actually got to go to the Scout unveiling. Like, tell me about that, man. That was insane.
Well, what's really crazy is so what I do on the side, or I've been doing it for a long time, but I had this audition to do this job, and they were like, okay, in the audition, tell us what you like about the outdoors. And so I just kind of bullshitted my way through it and say, there's this big event I just went to. We all camp out with this particular car. I didn't name the Scout. And it's just, sit by the fire, sleep in a tent, do all the stuff you're supposed to do. So anyways, I ended up getting the job. I don't know what it's for. The stylist is reaching out to me and she's like, hey, you're supposed to be this kind of rancher person. Do you have any cowboy stuff? I was like, yeah, I got some jeans. And she's like, okay, all that stuff is perfect. And I was like, well, what's this for? Anyway, I have no idea. And she goes, it's for this new EV that's coming out. And I knew that they were doing this reveal in Franklin in like 4 days from when this was happening. I was like, there's just no way that it's this. There's no way. I reach out to my agent. I was like, hey, do you know what this is for? He's like, they won't tell me anything. So like, all right, I'm just assuming like maybe it is, right? So like the day before I get the NDA and on the letterhead, it says Scout. I was like, you got to be shitting me. There's no way. I was like, this is just unbelievable. So, and I have to be careful about what I say because I signed this agreement. I don't want them to completely destroy me. So I told, my wife and, just a couple friends, my parents, that I was doing it. So I show up, getting ready. It's a big production. And it was finally time for me to do my part, my scene with this new Scout. We all pile in this minivan. We're going up this hill like this, and I can see it on the top of this mountain with these mountains in the background. It's just gorgeous. And it was that Tahitian red. And I was trying to make out like immediately, like, what does it look like? Did they keep the window, the lines and all this stuff? We finally pull up there and there was another family doing like this shoot with it. And I'm just standing there looking at it. And the other talent that was with me, they didn't even know what it was, never heard of Scout. So I'm like, some people want square headlights, some people want round headlights. You can see they kept that line. I was really trying to explain to them what they did right and how much it resembled the old one. And then I'm standing there, and the guys kind of figured out who I was and that I've had, this thing for 20 years. So they invite
Mm-hmm.
me over and they say, hey, we want to introduce you to some people. And so I meet the head designer, and they're like standing there, and they're like, what do you think? I'm like, this is kind of a lot of pressure because I would think I'm one of the first civilians, if you want to call it that, to see it that doesn't work for the company, that knows about the cars. And I told them what I really liked about it. I thought they did a really good job. And throughout the day, I got to sit in it. What else did I do? Pretend to,
Did
to
you get to
drive.
drive it?
No, because I think they had a real small, it's just a prototype. I think they had a real small battery in it. So I think it only went
Oh, okay.
a certain speed and distance. Um, but it was just an awesome day. And I had to sit on that for 2 days, knowing what I knew about it, right? And some people that knew I did it, they're asking me all these questions like, "Oh, does the top come off? What do the headlights look like? What are the this and this?" And I was like, "Man, I can't fucking tell you. I can't. I'll be
So this,
destroyed."
let me get this right. So the unveiling was last Thursday and or 2 Thursdays ago. You actually saw the truck in
Before,
metal in person
yeah,
Tuesday.
yeah, yeah.
Dude, so for
It's
2 days you had to keep this bottled up. How
I,
did you do that?
it was, dude, so I just kept it inside, and I didn't even tell honestly, I didn't tell a soul, and I thought it was because what was really neat about it was at the very end of it, I knew they were having this unveiling. I was like, "Can I go?" And they're like, "Man, we're really full," and I was like, "That's cool." I was like, "You know what? I get it. I'll just watch it on TV or stream it like everybody else." And at the very end of the day, Jamie, nice guy, comes up and he goes, "Hey, do you want to go?" And I swear, I said to him, I go, "Fuck yeah, I want to go." And so I got
Hell
the
yeah.
invite. And what was really special, I think, really neat about it is because I had seen it, and we're all in these bleachers watching them come out, and I got to see everybody's reaction the first time and see what they really thought like right away. And so like I saw them come out, but I also was watching the people, and it was like it was just a really neat moment, and they threw a hell of a party. It was awesome.
That is
What?
super cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that is once in a lifetime, absolutely like
Oh,
bucket list for anyone to go to an unveiling of a new model, especially with startup
well,
manufacturer.
and and when you say once in a lifetime, so my wife was out of town. And like I said, I have two small kids. And so it's like,
Mhm.
how can I do this? I have to figure out a way for my kids to be watched and for me to be able to go to this. So I had to pull a lot of strings. And I had to leave a little early, right after the unveiling to get home to them. But I made it work.
That is
It was awesome.
awesome. That is super cool.
Yeah.
So I told you my initial thoughts on the truck when I got to see it on Thursday, right? Thursday afternoon. When you saw it on Tuesday, like what were and they asked you, "Hey, what do you think?" Like what did you say?
Well, I tell you, because there was the first few things I noticed. Like I love the line they kept in the back. I love the window. And I said, you guys even put the side markers in the same spot. When I first saw the front, I really, really liked it. And
Mhm.
then as I looked at it a little bit longer, I didn't like it as much. But then I liked it some more. It's really strange, like when you first see something, your first initial thought, and then I had an hour just to stare at it. Um, so I originally wanted the circle headlights, right?
Mhm.
But I think now, again, looking at it now, I think they did the right thing.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. Now, did you drive one of your scouts to this shoot that you did?
You know what? I thought about it, um, and I didn't. I probably should have. I mean, it was probably 45 minutes from my house. Not like it couldn't make it, but it's loud. It's kind of obnoxious, and I didn't want to make it about that. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Dude,
And
I
like
get
it,
it. It could be looked at as a little like chuggy, like
yeah,
wearing the band T-shirt to the concert
yeah,
type of thing. I get
a
it,
hundred
dude. I
percent.
get it.
And like even
Yeah.
at the event, the event was 15 minutes from my house, and
Mhm.
I was like, should I take it? And I was like, you know what? They would have asked me to. To take it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't because when I got there, if you saw any of the footage, I think the ones that they had there were very strategic, right? I mean,
They were
mine
curated.
it wouldn't have worked. I probably would have had to park somewhere else. It just wouldn't have looked right. Like they had Glancy was there with like his 300 or the 300-mile 80 that he has, the
Mhm.
Traveler. My buddy's got a red carpet. He was there. The Anything Scout Sean was there. So they chose the right people. I think it was really well done. So
That's great, man. That is
yeah.
great. And they had
So
like the last scout that came off the line in 1980 there also, didn't they?
and the first one,
Oh, get out of
the very
here.
and they
No
were
way.
they were parked like this, the very first one and the very last one.
And is the very first one and the last one, are they both Tahitian red?
No, the first one's blue. And
Ah,
after
cool.
I sat and talked to John Glancy for a long time, and after talking to him, he was telling me there really wasn't much left of the very first one. Maybe it was,
Hmm.
part of a frame and this and that, and they kind of put it all together. But it was really neat to see. So, but
That's
speaking of
cool, man.
scouts, I want to get to the story of the one behind you. So, where did you find it? Were you looking for one? Like, tell me all about that one.
So I'll tell you, I've owned two Scouts already, and I like uniqueness to
Okay.
any vehicle, especially the Scouts, because there's so much heritage. So the first Scout I owned was a Scout 2, but it was in 1973, and anybody familiar with the Scouts knows that 73 is a unique grill year, right? It's one of the few unique grill years, along
Yeah.
with 1980, right?
Yeah.
So I owned that. I had a whole plan to build this thing. I was ready. It was out at Mount Zion Off Road, ready to be built. And a, at Classic 4x4, my business, I used to represent a lot of importers, basically restoration shops abroad that would bring vehicles here to the US, and I would advise, market, and represent the sale of those vehicles, right?
Yeah.
So one of my importer clients calls me and says, I have this FJ45 Troopy sitting in my shop. The body is off. The chassis is done. It's rolling. It has a fully rebuilt 2F engine in it, with an H55 5-speed trans. All I have to do is paint the body, put the body on the rolling chassis with the powertrain on it, connect a couple things, put the interior in, and it's done. Do you have a buyer in the US for it? And I said, well, what do you want for it? And
You're so
we
funny.
worked it out. So I decided to buy that FJ45 and ended up abandoning my first 73 Scout project. Ended up selling that to a enthusiast out of Texas, who actually, ironically, is a fashion executive. It's a woman that's a fashion executive, and she's finishing the build that I was going to do, almost like down
Really?
to the spec. Yeah, it's actually really cool. So I abandoned that, went out, was going to do this FJ45, and I have a client that has a large collection out in Montana. Happened to be talking to him one day, telling him, he's always interested in what I'm buying and selling for my own personal collection. Telling him about this FJ45, and he's like, "I want it." I'm like, "What do you mean, I want it?" He's like, "I want it." Like, if you're telling me I can choose my paint color, my interior finishes, like, I want it. I don't care. Like, what is it going to take? So I threw him a number, and he's like, yeah, that's fine. No problem.
Sure.
So now I have already sold off the 73 Scout that I was going to build for this FJ45. I opened up my mouth to a client about this FJ45 Troopy, and the client liked it so much that he wanted to buy it. So now I have nothing, right?
Now you have nothing.
Now I have nothing, right?
See.
So
Yeah.
I mean, I have trucks, but I had no project in the works. And about 2 years prior, I had seen a Scout Traveler. This Scout Traveler right here behind me, this 1980 Scout Traveler, had no sale high bid on Bring a Trailer. Go figure, a truck no sale high
Wow.
bids on Bring a Trailer. That's like half the auctions on BAT these days.
Yeah.
The days of throwing stuff against the wall, throwing it up on BAT and it's selling for crazy numbers are over. But nobody
Yeah.
will ever realize that. But they still continue to go do it, right? But this particular truck no sale high bidded, and I have a unique way of finding out who the sellers are, right? Getting behind that anonymity of that cloak of anonymity that BAT has. So I ended up reaching out to the seller. The seller was like, "Hey, man, like, dude, we were pretty far off at that point." So I said, "Let me do this. Let me prepare a full evaluation and valuation of the vehicle," because he had gotten a professional valuation that was flawed, like drastically flawed. So I said, hey, let me prepare it like I would a client, and maybe you'll let me represent the sale. So I prepared it, sent it off to him. It was all backed by hard data, true, metrics, analytics, trends, actual comps that have sold recently in the market. And this guy is an accountant, the guy that owned it, and the seller, and he's like, you know what, I can see where my initial valuation that I got was flawed. They provided me no actual comps, no data, no metrics, no analytical data. They just kind of based the number on what they felt like, not on true market data. He's like, but you did provide me true market data, and I appreciate that. But it's still, I have a lot of money into it. I need a little bit more out of it. I said, okay,
Sure.
cool. But I kept in touch with him for like the next, 18 months or so. And my wife and I live between coastal New Jersey in the spring to the fall, and then we in the late fall, and through the winter, and then early spring, we go down to Charleston, South Carolina. So in February of this year, or actually it was like early March of this year, I was heading up 95, and the guy that owned this truck was in Bethesda, Maryland, right off of 95. So as heading up 95, I call him and I'm like, "Hey, Andy, like, let me, I'm passing by your house. Like, any interest in selling the Scout?" He goes, "Chris, you got great timing. Like, my daughter's not using anymore." By the way, he built this Scout for his daughter to drive in high
I
school. It was her
love
daily
that.
driver.
That's awesome.
Oh man,
I
best story ever, best
love
backstory
that.
ever. He bought this Scout for his daughter, did a massive restoration on the Scout, like, had the body stripped down to the metal, replaced everything that needed to be replaced, had it all repainted, like, put four wheel disc brakes in it, really reconditioned the powertrain. So he did a great job, but his daughter had gone off to college. The truck was just taking up room at this point, and he's like, you know what, Chris, you know, whatever. He's like, come take a look at it. If you like it, maybe we can agree. So I came, take a look at it. It had been sitting for a while. I liked it, and we came to a number, and I bought the truck right there. Sent it out to Mount Zion Off Road. They did a full mechanical refurbishment. We rebuilt the engine, updated a lot of the systems, but kept it real classic, original. And then we put a lift on it, new wheels and tires, did a lot of interior, and then it just got back from the body shop. Because you'll see actually right behind me, there were a couple areas, and just like any Scout,
Yeah.
there little area, couple areas that needed to be touched up, but I also painted the grill to match the stripe in the top, and the interior is out of it now, and at my upholstery shop, getting a beautiful, like, tobacco pebbled
Ooh.
leather interior, with white piping. Really cool.
What color carpet you gonna do?
So I already have the new carpet kit in there. It's actually the original blue carpet kit.
Oh, okay. Well, so
Yep.
are those 17s on there?
No, they're actually 16. So
16.
little
Okay.
that's actually a fun story about the. You want to
I,
talk about the how these wheels ended up on there?
I do, and then I want to know why the 16. Okay, let's go.
Okay. So this truck had the original 15-inch polycast turbine wheels, which
Ooh.
anybody that's a Scout enthusiast knows. There's three unique variables to a 1980 Scout. The first is the square headlights and this grille.
Hmm.
The second is the 15-inch polycast turbine wheels. And the third is the Dana 300 transfer case. Right? Those are three unique variables that were only available in 1980. And I had five original 15-inch polycast, um, turbine wheels that I wanted to reuse. And when Mike and his team at Mount Zion Off Road, who were doing the work, they called me one day and they're like, "Chris, this truck has a four-wheel disc brake conversion on it, and the clearance on the interior of these 15-inch wheels, it works, but it's paper thin, and we're
Oh,
just not comfortable with it." They're like, "You have to do at least 16s." I
oh,
was like, I was like, "Oh, you're telling me I have to eat?" Like, it was like a shot in the heart. I wanted to keep
uh,
these 15 inches
yeah.
so bad, but they're like, "Chris, like, it's just like, we know you're gonna drive it. It's too close for comfort. It's working, but it's too close for comfort. You really need to go to at least 16s to give those discs some room and some breathing room, especially as they expand when they get hot, like, or contract and expand." I was like, "All right, man, like, we'll do what we do." But interesting. I was talking to Mike Cashman, who owns Mount Zion Off Road, and I said to Mike, I was like, "I know what I want." And he literally, before I even got it out of my mouth, he said, this truck would look amazing with Nomad Convoy 501s in salt.
He knew exactly what
I
it was
was
going
like, dude, you just took it out of my mouth. You took the words right out of my mouth. He goes, no problem. We're going to do 16 by 8s. We'll do, BFG ATs. I was like, awesome, perfect. Orders them, calls me, and says, hey, man, you're not going to believe this, but the center bore for the 16 by 8 Nomads that we ordered, right? They don't make a center bore that fits the Scout. So though the bolt pattern fits, the center bore doesn't fit. And I was like, oh, really? He goes, yeah, it's like
It's
some
like
type of weird like
strike two.
engineering error. Yeah. So Raceline Wheels owns Nomad, right?
Uh-huh.
So it was some type of like engineering oversight when they were manufacturing them. Like it just is what it is. But nobody up to this point had realized it. So he reaches out to Raceline, which owns Nomad, and Raceline did the coolest thing ever. They're like, send the wheels back. We'll bore them. We'll custom bore them for you, and so that they fit the Scout. So in the end, Raceline was
Magic.
awesome. They did me a solid, but there's a good chance that this is the only Scout that has 16-inch um, Convoy 501s on it.
So this is technically a one of one.
It could be a 101,
Yes, maybe.
it could be,
So
but maybe they've changed the engineering, so the bore is correct now for future production models. Obviously, maybe somebody else has bored them out, but I've never seen a Scout. The 15s do fit; they have the right bore. It's just the 16s that don't have the right bore.
so do you still have the turbine wheels?
So I don't have the turbine wheels, and so I had. You ready for this? I had five. Um, Excellent condition polycast turbine wheels, all original, wrapped in almost brand new BFG AT rubber, right? So but I did something really cool with them. There's a local enthusiast here in coastal New Jersey who, is kind of like, is really into scouts. He's actually him and his buddy are actually commercial fishermen by trade, but they have
Hmm.
their own kind of little scout garage and they tinker with their scouts and they have their own little thing going on. And they know a lot of the local scout enthusiasts in, coastal New Jersey. So I reached out to, when I knew I couldn't use the wheels, I reached out to him. It's a gentleman by the name of Anthony. I forget his Instagram handle. I think it's like Cornbinder 1979 or something like that.
Oh,
But
dude, I think I know that dude. Well, I
yeah,
don't
he's
know
a
him, but
great
yeah,
guy.
yeah.
Awesome dude. So I reached out to Anthony and was like, hey man, I have these five. Like, do you know anybody? And he's like, you're not going to believe this. One of the guys I know, a local enthusiast, has a 1980, but they're like the wheels that are on it are like aftermarket, like random, like early 90s, like, wheels. Let me see if he's interested. And he came back to me and Anthony was like, you know what? He's interested, but like five good condition polycast turbines wrapped in almost brand new BFG AT rubber are obviously very pricey. And I
Yes.
was like, you know what? If they're going on an original 1980, I'm going to make it worth his while. And I sold them to him for a song, and now they're on another original 1980.
Not only do you have like the greatest radio voice, but you're also a really good
Hey, you know what? I
man.
just, it's all about like the heritage. And if they were going to a good home, like, could I've probably gotten five times
Yeah,
what I got for them? Yeah, 100%. Right. But that's not right. I wanted them to go to a good home and I wanted them to be put on the right truck, and it all worked out. So everybody's happy in the end.
because I was going to say if you still had them, you'd need to put them on something that goes in your garage. But
Oh,
it's
definitely.
so speaking of that, is there anything like in the future that like something you haven't had or you've always wanted that you're looking for?
I mean, it's already in the works, and that's a Toyota Land Cruiser FJ43.
Okay. Is there like an ultimate? I mean, is that maybe that is your ultimate, but like an ultimate classic 4x4 that you've always wanted?
It's sitting right behind me.
Sitting right
1980
behind you.
International Harvester Scout Traveler long wheelbase Traveler. It's actually sitting right behind. This is this is my holy grail. This is
Is it really?
my Oh
That's
man,
awesome.
this is my holy grail. This is, I love the square headlight, original 1980. I like that uniqueness. Like the 73 has its unique variables, the
Yeah.
80 has its unique variables. I also love the wheelbase Traveler. This is my
What the
bucket
fuck?
list holy grail truck right here.
Um, so do you have like with that truck behind you, once the interior is done and everything, are you completely finished with it or do you have more plans for it?
No, I'm done. I mean,
Done.
we've rebuilt. Yeah, I mean, the braking system is already four wheel disc brakes. I do actually have a new Scout or Die brake booster kit coming. So I'm gonna up, just update that. And then once the interior comes, like I'm done. I'll throw the new brake booster kit in. But like I don't really there's nothing more to really do other than
Yeah.
just enjoy it at this point.
Well, because it looks really sharp, and some people it's like it's just never done. Like with this one here, there's still a lot of things I would like to do, but painting it isn't one of them. To me, like that's how like when I first kind of got into these, like to me they were always kind of banged up and maybe not rusty, but just maybe not the nicest paint, and that was always to me like a Scout, right? And Broncos were always just a little bit shinier. And so with this, right, like I have no problem going down a trail and a branch hits it. I mean, that's what it's for me. The one you can't see over here is a little shinier, and I would never do that. But to me, that was always kind of what a Scout was. But now that they're crazy expensive, you know, you can justify that nice paint job. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah,
I
but
paid 20.
Patina's hot in the market right now.
Is it? Well, because like with this, I
Yeah.
paid $2,500 for it. So you don't put a $10,000 paint job on a $2,500 car. You know what I mean? So
But it was 2,500 a long, long time ago. That
long, long time
2,500
ago.
is probably
Is
20x now.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So with your podcast, what direction are you going? You constantly get these really good guys. Where are you going with it?
So, and to answer your question earlier from the episode, how the podcast came to fruition was the business came to fruition. My classic 4x4 business, where I advise, market, and represent the sale of collector trucks and 4x4s. And a mentor of mine, I was having lunch with him one day, and he's like, "Hey, man," he's like, "That's cool that you're doing this. Like, it's always neat to follow your passion." He goes, "But you should do a podcast." He's like, "I think you'd be really good at it. You understand these trucks, like,
You have a
and,
great voice for it.
that's awesome. I
Dude,
appreciate
you
that."
really
And I was,
do.
I know everybody says that. I don't. I hate listening to myself talk, but you would never know it.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but yeah, he's like, "You should do a podcast." So on a whim, I looked into it and I reached out to a couple buddies of mine that were enthusiasts and collectors in the truck and 4x4 space. I was like, "Hey, I'm launching this podcast. Will you be one of my guests?" And one thing led to another. I'm on my fourth season right now. And
Really?
yeah, it's fourth season. I used to do 2 seasons a year. And then when Classic 4x4, the business, got really, really busy, I wasn't able to do 24 episodes a year. So I'm now doing one a month. I'm doing 12 episodes a year. So I used to do 12 episodes in the spring and 12 episodes in the fall and take the summer and the winter off. Now I'm just doing 12 episodes year round, one a month. Um, but
And how do you find these people? Do you just kind of reach out to them and say, I mean, I'm sure at this point it's a lot easier, right? When you first get started, you're asking the friends, but as you grow, you can get those people that you really want to get. I mean, do you just reach out to them and send them a message? And how does that
So
work?
there's two parts to it. When I first launched, it was just like I was begging friends because I was
Yeah.
nobody. I wasn't ranking on the charts. I wasn't a top 25 automotive podcast. I wasn't a top 10% of all podcasts. I was just like a guy talking about trucks, right, and
Yeah.
interviewing people. But when I set out, and I think this was a key to the success, was I didn't want to do there in the truck and 4x4 space. There's a ton of content that is like how to and build. And then
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
ton of like off road, get dirty, wheel them. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about collecting, buying, selling, the
Hmm.
passion, the enthusiasm, the markets, and really, what's behind these trucks and the history. And there's nobody else out there was talking about that. And I think that gravitated with listeners. And by the time I launched my second season, I was charting.
Really?
And
That's
oh,
awesome,
yeah,
man.
I was charting by the time I launched my second season. By the time I launched my third season, I was a top 10. I was top 10% of all podcasts. Which keep in mind, there's 4 million active podcasts out there,
You're top 10?
and top 10%, top 10%. So not top 10, top
Yeah, but
10%
no,
of all
that's
podcasts. Yeah.
I,
Which means I'm in the top 400,000.
I kind of feel honored and special that I get to have this conversation with you.
No way, get out of here. I'm glad that we got to do this interview. So, what happens is when you start to chart and people start to talk about it, you get agencies like digital marketing agencies,
Sure.
PR agencies, like communication agencies that reach out and say, "Hey, we would like to have one of our clients, the CEO or the founder, on your podcast," right? So that's what started to happen, and as it gained prominence, a lot of the people that actually are that I've had, a lot of the founders, CEOs, large scale collectors are actually were already listeners. They were fans that reached out to me and were like, "Hey, I'd love to be on the podcast." Or when I reached out to them to be like, "Hey, would you be interested in being on the podcast?" They were like, "That this is amazing. I already listened to it. I'm a loyal listener." So it,
Sure.
it like everything, as you grow, you get bigger, it becomes more prominent, becomes more interesting, you attract more, and that's kind of what happened.
Well, I think it's interesting too. Is like, I'm a small fry, right? But I believe in it, and I think it's going to grow. But for the most part, anytime I ask somebody, like, hey, do you want to do this thing, and basically talk about you in your car? I mean, what guy or girl wouldn't want to do that, right? Tell their story. I mean, I think it's the possibilities are really endless of who could do it. And to me, I really love the heart and this. That's why it's called Heart and Horsepower. But the stories behind it, because there's so many good ones. Like even with your Scout behind you, I didn't know that was like your dream car. I mean, that's awesome, man.
Yeah, this thing is my bucket list. I'll always own other trucks, and eventually, at some point, I'll maybe pass it down the line. But as of right now, this is like my go-to. It's coming to Charleston with me for the winter. I'm excited, and it's got a cool story behind it. And every time I get it back from, new more work being done, I send it to the previous owner, and he sends those pictures off to his daughter, and they like are just so
Oh,
ecstatic
that's cool.
that like I'm doing all this cool stuff to it.
So is that one? Is that like the unsellable? Is that like you'll have that forever type car?
So I don't do that anymore because I always said that 1981
Really?
CJ7, I was never going to sell it, and I sold it. So I I never say never in my book, but for the time being, I don't see this leaving my collection anytime soon. Maybe down the road I LS swap it, though it does have a freshly rebuilt 345 in it that is absolutely humming perfectly right now. But we'll see. Time will tell.
Would you ever like that CJ7, the one that got away? I mean, would you ever try to buy it back?
Oh, in a heartbeat, in a heartbeat. If he called me next week and was like, you know what, Chris, like, I think I want to sell it. I need you to represent the sale. I'll be like, dude, you're
I'll
not
just buy
selling
it.
it. I'm just gonna pay. I'll give you market value or what you paid me for it. Like, I'll just take it back. I don't think I would let it go into another set of hands.
I had in 2001, I bought a 69 Charger, right? 440
Cool.
RTSE. And I think I paid, I say 12,000. My buddy who's with me said I paid 15, whatever. And I had that for a while and I sold it. I needed to buy a house, whatever. So I sold it for 30 grand. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's probably worth, 100 now. But what's interesting is the guy who has it, I sold it to a crab fisherman in Maryland. He had it for years. And then randomly, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago now, this guy found me somehow, and he is a doctor or a lawyer in New York City, and it's parked like in a probably very expensive garage up there. And he was asking me some questions about what I did to it before the previous owner had it. And he sent me a picture, and I lined it up with like a picture that I had from a long time ago, and it looks exactly the same. And I just think that's so cool that something like that that you own, you remember it so much, and some people will keep in touch with you and send you pictures. So that's why I love that you send the pictures to the fellow you bought it from. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, man, it's you gotta, there's an appreciation, like you said, like it's all about telling. Every one of these trucks has a story,
Yeah,
and we don't, as they pass down the line through owners and owners, you don't know all the details, but you can always put different things together. But if we can continue to really keep those stories going as we pass them down the line, that's something special. And that's part of your success at Heart and Horsepower is you're creating content that is different than what other people are creating content about. It's not just the how to build. It's not just getting dirty and off roading it. You're telling the story of these vehicles, which are at the end of the day they all have their own personalities and they're living and they're breathing.
I love it, man, and I love what you do. Like I said, I'm driving to Little Rock this afternoon. I'm going to catch up on some classic 4x4 podcasts.
I love that. I'm actually about to head out to the airport, and I'm heading out to SEMA for a couple days.
Oh, that's right. You're going to SEMA, man. I'm jealous. I've never. Is it? Have you ever been?
I've never been to SEMA before. I had the opportunity to book a bunch of meetings out there. I'm out real quick. Like I get out there Tuesday night, and I'm taking the red eye back Thursday night. So I'm not out there. I'm out there, I guess, like maybe 2 full days. Wednesday I'm booked with meetings. Thursday I'm going to walk the show. But everybody I've talked to that's been out there is like, Chris, you're not even going to see half of it. It's just huge. It's just
Massive,
massive, and
right?
everything is so
Overwhelming.
cool. Yeah.
I
Uh,
really appreciate you being on. This is the first time I've ever done it staring at my computer and you instead of face to face. This was an adventure, and I appreciate it.
Dude, I'm glad that I could be the groundbreaker for your first Heart and Horsepower
Yes.
remote interview. I hope it opens up a world of other amazing people that you can interview. And dude, I can't thank you enough for having me on the show today, Eric. I
I
really
appreciate it.
appreciate it. And most importantly, I'm glad I made a new friend in the community.
Hell yeah. When are you going to come to Nashville?
One of these days, I'll come to Nashville. Actually, my cousin owns a restaurant. My cousin, who I've talked about on the Classic 4x4 podcast before, is a well-known restaurateur in New York City, and he's starting to open up restaurants in other foodie type cities. And Nashville is a great food city. So he just opened up a restaurant, which is Frankie's. It's in East Nashville somewhere.
Okay, yeah.
So I'll head down there at some point, visit you, hit the restaurant,
Yes.
and meet all the other awesome members of the truck and 4x4 community down in that area.
Sounds awesome, man. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, brother. Hey, absolute pleasure.
Have fun at have fun at SEMA.